Astrid, I'm going to get out of your way. Best of luck.
Okay, thank you. Let's see now if you can see my screen. Okay. So
at the moment, I'm still seeing, which is fine, but I'm still seeing you. I'm not seeing your screen.
I'm presenting now, so I'll try to click again on the Google Slides. Let me escape. Okay. Here it is. Now. Okay. Let me share.
The joys of modern technology.
Yes.
There it is.
It's a bit slow. Okay,
no
great.
Problem. Best of luck.
Thank you. Don't need my notes. All right. So, hello everyone. Or should I say Privet, since I'm going to talk about how we localize Slack into Russian. So first, I will briefly talk about localization at Slack. Second, I'll dive in the challenges the Russian language presents. Then I'll explain how we face them and what our localization strategy was. And then I'll conclude with a few takeaways. So first of all, if you're not familiar with Slack, here's our interface so that you have an idea of what we are localizing. You're probably already aware of that. This is a collaborative app, a messaging platform for business where users can communicate in channels. And this is our localization team. I have to say we did not have that many members during the Russian launch. Some members recently joined us. Yeah, that's great. Nevertheless, the team structure was the same during the Russian launch. So Anka Grieve is leading our team, and we are divided in 3 pillars. In a nutshell, the projects pillar manages global and regional projects to ensure they are delivered on time and on budget. The quality pillar oversees and measures linguistic quality for localized content across multiple languages to ensure a native experience for our users. And then we have the systems pillar, which provides technical guidance to us, to all of us, and to other members at Slack. And its goal is to optimize localization tooling and processes and minimize manual work. So like I said, everybody was not here during the Russian launch, and everybody did not work on the Russian launch, but the 3 pillars participated in it. And I have to give a big thank you to Mike, Andrea, and Christina, who did not only participated to this effort, but they also helped me balancing day-to-day operational work and help a lot of people in our teams. So Slack's mission is to make working life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. For this reason, Slack started localizing in 2016 and is now available in 12 languages. As you can see on this slide, we are supporting Portuguese for Brazil, German, Italian, French. We have 2 variants of Spanish, Spanish for Spain, Spanish for Latin America, Japanese, Korean, and simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese. And the last language to be launched was Russian in June 2021. We did not launch beginning of June because there were several holidays in Russia. As you can guess, localizing into Russian presents its own special sets of challenges. Some of them are purely linguistic and usually can be fixed by the translators. And some of them are cultural or technical and sometimes require the intervention of engineers or designers. So I'm going to take you through the top ones. We faced starting with the Cyrillic alphabet. So this is not this, yes, the Cyrillic alphabet. Why would that be a challenge? Well, first, because everybody working on a language launch does not really always speak the language. This kind of projects involves a lot of people, not only translators. We also have project managers, programmers, quality engineers, testers, people fixing bugs who are working on it. And obviously, the Slack, the application, the software has to work in Russian. The font needs to be properly displayed on the user interface. And users need to be able to type in Russian in Slack and to perform different kind of actions and use their keyboards also. Why am I talking about the keyboards? Here's a screenshot of a Russian keyboard for a Mac. It's obviously different from US English keyboards. And bear in mind that all the keyboards are not the same, like Mac keyboards, Windows keyboards, laptop keyboards, desktop keyboards. And as you can see, on top of that, Russian keyboards display Latin characters and Cyrillic characters. Now, we offer the possibility to use several keyboard shortcuts in Slack, and we had to localize them. And there is an example of a keyboard shortcut at the bottom of this slide. For instance, if Russian users want to type bold text in a message in Slack, they can enter the command plus the Latin character B. So it's the Latin character B, not the Cyrillic character B. We had to choose between Cyrillic alphabet or Latin alphabet for our commands. And in order to avoid confusion, we localized the keyboard shortcuts, but we used the Latin characters. And our linguists and some told us that most of the time, people who are used to typing this kind of comments prefer the Latin character. So that's why we chose this one. So the Cyrillic alphabet also caused some functional bugs when using what we call slash commands in our Russian interface. Slash commands are actions that users can take directly in messages in Slack. So it's supposed to save them time. They don't have to go somewhere else on the interface, maybe in the menu, in the settings. So for instance, if someone wants to archive a channel, they just have to type in a message the slash and then the word archive in English, and in Russian, it would be archivirovat. So, of course, if this doesn't work, that just defeats its purpose. And our engineers had to do quite some work to make sure these commands were working in Russian. And another issue we faced is that we realized that if the translations had a mistake in them, if they were not consistent, if there was even a space added to the translations, then the commands were not working. We faced exactly the same kind of issue with what we call mentions. Here are some examples of @mentions. When users type the @ followed by either everyone or here or channel in a message, they can notify a larger audience, like an entire channel or an entire workspace or a user group. And it is crucial that the translations don't have any mistake, that they are consistent everywhere in our content, and the engineers also had to make sure that we supported the Cyrillic alphabet. Our users can also type what we call search modifiers in Slack in order to narrow their search. So for instance, if they're looking for some information in Slack after a certain date, or from certain users, coming from certain users, or information which is in a certain channel, they can type what is displayed here on the screen. And we support the Cyrillic alphabet for these search modifiers. And we also made sure that the translations were consistent everywhere in our content to avoid any bug. Another challenge is that you are also probably aware of it. Words are inflected in Russian, more precisely the endings, to express a grammatical function or an attribute like gender, number. Nouns have 6 grammatical cases: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, instrumental, prepositional. What does that mean? That means that if you have one word in English, like the word book, for instance, in the singular form, you have just one form in English. In Russian, you're going to end up with 6 ways of saying it. And that's only the singular form. It's the same system for the plural form. On top of that, if you use possessives with nouns, well, the case endings of the nouns will depend on several factors: on the gender of the name, the letter the name ends with, and whether or not that letter is a valid marker. So there is no way to provide one example of how possessives combine with names in Russian. It will depend on each individual name. As a result, translations can be challenging when linguists do not have enough context, or when the sentences they have to translate contain placeholders. So here's an example at the bottom of the slide of a string with a placeholder. The placeholder is also called a variable, and this sentence, user's names profile, is exactly what the translators are going to see when they translate. The username is going to be replaced by any name, and we can't control that. The translators cannot change that, and they don't translate that. The only thing the translators are going to translate is the apostrophe S profile. And it's tricky because they need to make sure the sentence is going to be grammatically correct. So a workaround is to use what we could call a descriptor. In this case, it would be the word user in this sentence. So if in English you have a sentence like John's profile, in Russian it's going to become profile of the user John. Some sentences can also be difficult to localize when the gender of the subject is unknown. In the past tense, Russian verb forms change depending on the gender of the subject. So in the first sentence up there on the slide, you don't know whether the subject is going to be feminine or masculine, because we also use placeholders, a placeholder in this sentence. So an option, a workaround to localize, is to add a suffix in brackets. But it's not very easy to read, so linguists prefer not to use this option. I have grayed out this option because you end up with both options in the sentence, the masculine and the feminine. The other option is to use, again, a descriptor, like in the previous example, in this case, user. So if you have a sentence like, also John joined and left in English, in Russian, you will end up with a sentence saying, also user John joined and left. It's also tricky to translate sentences starting with the pronoun they, because in English, this pronoun can refer to one or several users, and that does not exist in Russian. So we had no remedy for these kind of strings, but to go and look for the context for all of them and provide the information to our translators. We also use placeholders in some sentences that are going to contain numbers. So the placeholders are going to be replaced by any number. What the translators are going to see when they translate is these first sentences that I'm showing on the top left of the slides. For if you want to write 1 minute or 2 minutes, that's what the English is going to show. English only has singular and plural, but Russian has several forms. So this affects the way the sentences are translated and coded. So in this example, the only thing the translators are going to localize is the word minute or minutes. And in order to make sure the sentences are going to be grammatically correct, this is how they can enter the translations. They will have to enter one translation for numbers ending in 1. They'll have to enter another sentence for numbers ending in 2, 3, or 4. They'll have to enter another sentence for 0 and numbers ending in 5, 9, and round numbers like 1000. And lastly, there is another option, starting with other, by the way, by the tag other, where they can enter a translation if the sentence is going to contain decimal numbers. The length of the translation is another challenge. Russian words very often have more characters than English words, and Russian sentences very often contain more words than an English sentence. Consequently, translations very often do not fit on the user interface, especially in menu items, call to actions, pop-up windows, mobile strings. So here are 2 examples on this screen that show that the Russian translations are longer than the English source. On the left, you can see what is our left sidebar in Slack. And on the right side, you can see some buttons that are showing up in some of our web pages. And fortunately, this left side panel is expandable in Slack, but engineers had to do a lot of work to make that happen. And for the buttons, our engineers and designers had to change the position of the buttons, and they had to expand the size of the boxes. Design elements is another challenge because they have different connotations in different cultures. So for instance, we use emojis in some messages that are being shown to our users when they are done reading all their messages in Slack. And in these examples, the emoji, the bee, was replaced by the surfer. And we also had to change the translation so that it fits the design element. And the sentence, "You are up to date," became "You have conquered this wave." And then for the second example, the sentence is roughly the same, but the leaves were replaced by the OK sign. So what was our strategy to face all the challenges that the language presents? I can summarize our strategy in 4 phases: preparation, translation, review in context, and feedback phase. So the first thing, of course, is to work with linguists, and we onboarded them. We work with a service language provider and their team of linguists, and our linguists are based in Russia. We started by familiarizing these linguists with Slack. More precisely, we provided detailed information about what is Slack and how to use Slack, and also about our voice and tone. We worked with the linguist to prepare a style guide and a glossary to make sure the terminology would be consistent in the translations and that our voice and tone would be respected. And then we also gathered information about the language, about the Russian language, and we shared our knowledge with other teams at Slack. After that, our project manager and our business analyst worked together to identify the content we needed to translate and to list and isolate all the files that needed to be sent for translation. And they prepared a timeline for that. So we translated ahead of time, as soon as we knew we could start translations, as much content as possible. So we translated our product, the Slack interface, on desktop and mobile. We translated our help center pages and our website pages first. And we only had to translate right before the launch a blog about the version launch and a few release notes. And that allowed us, once the translations were done, to prepare some testing for linguistic testing. So we provided access to the linguists to a testing environment, to a Slack workspace. And we prepared instructions and test plans for them so that they would be able to review the translations in context. And they reviewed the help center, the product, and the web pages. And they fixed a huge number of linguistic issues, mainly truncation issues, by the way. And I should have specified that we want our linguists to review their translations in context, because when they translate for the first time, they also review their translations, of course. But it's not the same when you see the translations in context. Then you can see if the sentences are going to be titles, buttons, where they're going to show up in sentences. And it's way easier to have an overview and to catch issues. So after that, our engineers and other teams at Slack also performed some functional testing. And they sometimes reported linguistic issues that we fixed. We also have some internal users at Slack who are native Russian speakers, and they were able to share their feedback with us. And we also were able to fix some issues thanks to them. And on top of that, some of our customers volunteered to test a beta version of Slack, and they were able to share their feedback with us before the launch. So in conclusion, this kind of project is usually a huge cross-functional effort. Good communication, a lot of planning, knowledge sharing, facilitates teamwork, and helps us launch when we have planned to do so. It also helps everybody make the best use of their time. It was also crucial for us to have several review steps and to do the linguistic review in context and to do functional reviews. And this is crucial to catch and fix most important issues before the launch. And once the launch is over, this is not the end of the project, because we keep translating, we keep monitoring the quality of the translations, and feedback from internal people and customers is welcome, of course. And since there are roughly 138 million Russian speakers in Russia and probably 150 million in the world, hopefully with the localization of Slack in Russian, even more people in Russia and across the world will be able to move their projects forward in the language they have preferred. So thank you for listening to me.
That was fantastic. Thank you very much, Astrid.
I'll stop sharing.
Yes, that would be fantastic. Before we jump into the Q&A section, I do want to point out that there is a book which Astrid is going to give to somebody here. The book which you have decided to raffle or to put up is The Culture Map by Erin Mayer. I've got to say, it's a fantastic book. If you're working in the localization industry and you don't have this, then shame on you. But hey, someone's going to fix that problem right now. So yes, if there are a lot of questions coming in, so we will jump straight into it. The first question is something which you touched on there towards the end of your presentation. It's from Oleg, and Oleg says, maybe it's just me, but I wasn't convinced to switch from English to Russian when Slack rolled out in Russian. Is convincing users to start using a new language that you introduce part of your strategy? Actually, those users who've been using Slack in English for a very long time and are quite familiar or okay with the interface in English.
We don't want to force anyone to do something they don't want to do. So this isn't just they have to use what they prefer. So we did not do a lot of publicity around it, but we did advertise the fact that we were launching Slack in Russian in Russia. So the only thing we did is that we published a blog about that in Russian that they could see in Russia. And we also had a banner on Slack saying, if you want to use Slack in Russian, you can switch to Russian, so that they could choose what they wanted. And that's,
can you give any indication of the percentage of users who have made the step over to Russian? Or
oh, I'm afraid I have no idea about that. We were not communicated this kind of information. We know, though, that some of our customers asked us to translate into Russian, and that's why we also decided to do it.
Yeah,
a lot of them. And we also know that there's a huge number of people speaking Russian, and the level of the number of people speaking very well English or who would be willing to use English is probably not really high, which is one of the reasons why we decided to translate into Russian.
Okay, cool. The next question that has popped up to the top of the list, there's a lot of questions coming in, so we could be busy now. Martin has asked, and I think it might be a little bit early, but Martin has asked, did the return on investment on Russian localization, or is the return on investment for Russian localization in the range that you expected?
We did not calculate it yet.
No,
yeah, speaking.
It's a little bit too early.
And yes, it's a bit too early to know that.
Okay.
I'm sure that, I don't want to say anything wrong, so I'm sure our team are checking that, but we were not communicating any figures about that yet, because it takes way more time to calculate it. And because when you launch a product in a country in their language, it's really tricky to measure and to see what the effects are. And you cannot say, oh, the number of people using our product is increasing because we just translated it. There are so many other factors involved. That's why it's taking a lot of time to calculate and to see.
It's definitely not something you'll be able to tell within the first 6 months.
No.
Okay. Just before I jump into the other questions, you might need to get in contact with Konstantin Dranch if you're not already in contact with him, because I think this would be a fascinating presentation to do at Translation for Russia. But okay, next question is Wojtek has asked, now that you have Russian, the path to more Slavic languages is easier. Do you plan to add some other Slavic languages like Czech or Polish or any of the others?
We don't have any plan at the moment. Like you said, we've already made the first step. So the door is open. But we don't have any plan at the moment, and we don't have any idea what will be the next languages we're going to localize.
Okay. I suppose the demand will dictate where you go.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Rachel has asked a question which you have touched on already, but I will put it to you here specifically. What does Slack do? Sorry, does Slack do a localized marketing campaign to announce this launch? And if so, how did that go?
We had a very, yes, we did a little, if I can put it like that, marketing campaign. Like I said, we only advertised that in Russia, not in other countries. And we only had a banner on the website saying that people could use Slack in Russian. We sent, and we published a blog announcing that in Russian and in other languages, of course.
Okay. Overall, would you say that it was a success? It sounds like it was a soft launch, that it was a launch without a huge amount of fanfare, just to put it out and see how people grow into it. Yep. Is it something that there could be a bigger announcement in a year's time after through this soft launch?
I assume that if our team has more information in the future, get more feedback from the customers, they could announce it, yes, in the future, announce that.
It is possible. Is it something that Slack have done with other languages that were released, where it was released in a, shall we say, a soft manner, and later a bigger, more fanfare of an announcement?
They have, yes, they have. They've done that for most of the languages, actually.
Okay. Oh, so it is something that is possibly in the pipeline for the Russian market then as well. Yeah. Okay, so we'll jump into the next question, and all my questions have just jumped on me. So Anna's asking lots of questions at the moment. Anna, the first one that comes up on my list, were you directly in contact with the linguist, or did the communication go through the project manager working for the LSP?
Both. Most of the communication went through our language service provider, but we were also in contact with our linguists when we needed to ask them very specific questions, or when we needed them to answer very quickly. Like, for instance, right before the launch, we were communicating with them on Slack, and that helped us get information super quickly.
And another question, which is from Anna as well, and is in the same sort of ballpark. How long did the whole project take, from the decision to localize into Russian until the launch last summer? And then as part of that, which phase took the longest?
So it's a bit tricky to give you a very accurate idea of how long it takes, because we learned that we would launch in Russian a few months before the launch, but we had also to launch before that other languages. We had to launch Korean, Italian, simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese. And we had to do that first. But if I remember well, as soon as we knew what we had to do, we were able to start the preparation phase. And it took us roughly 3 months to translate everything. And then it took 3 weeks for each kind of linguistic review. So 9 weeks, let's say, more. And then a few weeks to before the launch to get some feedback.
That's
and
amazing.
we actually fixed all the bugs super quickly in 1 or 2 weeks, I think.
In my head, that's incredibly fast. I've worked on Instagram posts that have taken longer than that. That's very, very impressive. Okay, without wanting to spend too long on any one question, because there's still quite a few questions coming in. Andrea asks, how do you monitor translation quality post-launch?
So the first step is the feedback we get from internal users at Slack. Like I said, we have several internal speakers who speak Russian, and they report the bugs. And customers also, they can write to us and report issues. And some linguists are great. Sometimes they also point out issues. And we also monitor other languages. And when we find issues in other languages, we check everything. So that helps us fix everything in bulk.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yulia is asking, as a Russian language lead, I'd be really curious to know who was the ultimate evaluator of quality? Internal users at Slack, lead translators on the vendor side, and also in addition to the emojis, were there any other things that required transcreation or adaptation?
So there was a lot of feedback, and there was the ultimate person who gave us the, let's say, the most accurate feedback, who decided that was the linguist. But I don't know if it was the ultimate in this case, because we had some, I don't speak Russian, I can read it, but I have an idea of what things mean. Our business analyst speaks Russian, so he was able to check also everything. And so we evaluated what was done from the beginning by our linguists, and we really trust what they were doing. So we handed over this responsibility to them afterwards. But we had a lot of back and forth with them, with internal speakers, customers, about their comments when they were giving us feedback, and we were communicating in English, and they all explained to us what their choices were, so that we would understood everything, even if we did not speak Russian.
Okay. Hope that answers the question.
I hope it's, yeah.
Yeah, all of the questions, there's a lot of detail that
yes.
you could go into on all of it. We've done it a huge amount of time. We're trying to keep it concise. There is the possibility to get answers to any of the questions made into a post next week with Smartcat. I'll jump into the next one. Valentina has asked, when looking for vendors, either linguists or LSPs, what would you consider a red flag not to work with them?
I don't, might be several, but it would be easier to answer by saying what allowed us to trust the linguist. Our service language provider allowed us to share the information we wanted to share with the linguists, and to onboard them and to have sessions with them where we would meet them. And what was important is to make sure the linguist understood our voice and tone in English, and would be able to reflect that in their translations. For that, we had to give them a lot of information and to prepare them. And if your language service provider doesn't allow you to do that, then the translators might miss some information, I guess.
That would be a fairly major red flag then. Yeah. Christina has asked, were there any challenges your team wasn't able to fix during the localization process?
So one of the examples I gave you about the translations, when we have to add words in the translations, for instance, if you have John sent a message, and when you have John could change, it could be Jane, it could be John, it could be anyone. And the fact that in Russian we have to add user John did that is not ideal. It doesn't flow. It's understandable, but it's something that we would like to improve. These little things.
Yeah. There's always small bits that can be improved on, but that they'll happen over time.
And then you always have surprises. It's a software. It's not like text you translate. So you can always have regression. You can always have bugs that are linguistic bugs, functional bugs that are popping up afterwards, which is why we always have to consistently monitor that.
You're never bored.
No, it's never ending.
No. So Catherine Busman has asked, how is the decision taken? So what was the business case made to launch in Russian? And how did you then go about creating a budget to achieve that?
So I don't have all this information because I work in the localization team and these decisions are taken by other teams at Slack. But what I know is that it's a collective decision taken at Slack and it's based on different factors. And it's not the first language launch we're doing. So they probably studied everything we've done for the previous launches, and based on that, they're taking their decisions.
Yeah, like you said, you've done this. This isn't your first rodeo, so you'll have, or they will have a set of criteria to meet when they want to launch in any new country.
But basically, in general, that sounds pretty basic. But they have to study everything's happening in the business, and then they take their decision.
Cool. So Galina has said, great process setup. My comment is that the process is a cycle, so maybe a circular diagram would be a better representation of the process. The feedback is led into the translation step.
Totally.
I think that's fair. Fair comment.
Very good. Yeah.
Good shout, Galina. Anna, another question from Anna. Do you have any advice or best practice on how to ensure and maintain quality in different languages, especially when you don't have an internal linguist, but if you're working with LSPs?
I think what helps us most to ensure quality of the translations were the different reviews we did. The fact that our linguists could review in context, and we prepared a lot of not documentation, but we followed what they were doing. So we could check the quality also. And they were giving us feedback in English. And we were checking everything, like what was the source string, what was the current sentences, and what the expected sentences should be. And then what was the issue in this sentence, why the translator wanted to correct it. And so for every thing the linguist flagged and corrected, we had comments, very detailed comments about everything.
Great. That's fantastic. The final question, because we're almost out of time with the Q&A section, I'm going to give it to Valentina Ardila. I haven't butchered your name, Valentina. How much time would you recommend to allocate to the creation of style guides and glossaries before launching a large project like this one? And were meetings set up with the linguists, and are these helpful?
They are crucial for us. It depends on what you want to convey. It depends on your product, but they are usually some universal set of rules that you want to make sure everybody's going to follow. So it took us a few weeks for us, 3-4 weeks probably at least 4 weeks. The glossary can be longer. It depends also on the amount of words you have in your glossary. We already had a glossary, and we had already prepared, so that's a bit quicker for us. The glossary is something hard to prepare for the linguist because they have not translated anything yet. So they need to get familiar with the product first, and then they need to dive into the glossary, the translation of the glossary terms. And it's crucial because it ensures consistency everywhere. Especially if you have a product where you want to explain to your user how to use something. If you use one word, a very specific word, let's say channel for us, it has to be translated the same way everywhere. You can't tell people use this and then this and this. No, nobody will understand. So the glossary is crucial. The style guide for us, maybe it's not for everybody. For us was crucial because we have a very specific voice and tone at Slack, and we wanted the linguist to convey very specific things.
Yeah.
And then you have different ways. You have sometimes in languages different grammar rules you can, well, not different grammar rules you can follow, different kind of style you can follow. And it's easier in a style guide to say, okay, we'll always use this way of saying things, for instance, or this rule, and it's the same. For instance, times, or there are different ways sometimes of writing times or length of numbers, or people are not always aware of how to do it because it's very specific. So writing down these rules, it's easy to follow, and everybody's going to do it, and you will not have mistakes that you'll have to correct later. So that saves you a lot of time, actually.
Massively. Astrid, I'm afraid we have run out of time. I feel that this could go on for another hour. Based on sort of roughly what you're talking about there, when you launch a product in different countries and different cultures, you have different types of humor, different types of informal communication will be received in different ways, which is just another plug for the book that you're giving away right now, the Culture Map by Erin Mayer. Would you do me the honor of choosing a question from the Q&A list that you would like to give this book to?
The person who made the comment about the feedback, the process. I'm afraid I didn't write down the circular process. That's useful. I use it.
That was Galina, I believe.
It's true. Yes.
Yes. So Galina.
But I'm sorry. All the questions were super interesting. So I'm sorry to just have to choose only one person.
I know it's really, really unfair to put that spotlight on you at the end of your presentation. But yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Excuse me, I just swallowed something. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Congratulations, Galina. You will be getting a copy of the Culture Map.